Hi, this is going to be your first recording for lectures. It'll probably run quite a bit longer than the usual ones because this is actually review. In the future, you can expect these to be no more than about 5 minutes. So I'm going to start with reviewing Chapter 1, Statistics, the Art and Science of Learning from Data. So we've had a couple of definitions of statistics. One is actually gathering data in order to be able to come up with a short description or to do some inference from the data. Another one is the definition of statistics versus parameters. Statistic is a type of summary such as the average or the median from the sample, while parameter is the same information but for the entire population. So if you look for all as a descriptor, like all the members of a group, you're usually talking about a parameter. You're talking about the entire population. So when we talk about an exploratory data analysis, it's actually the description of analysis. And there we'll talk about the mean, the median, the mode, first quartile, the third quartile, things like that. So we're going to set up some type of survey or experiment typically to gather some data to answer questions we think statistics could answer. The data involves things called cases, labels, variables, and values. Our main first distinction is between categorical and quantitative variables. And we want to look at some key characteristics of a data set. So the cases are the things you're actually looking at. Like if I do a case study on medicine, I'm looking at a bunch of patients typically. But it may be customers, it may be actually companies, it may be schools, things like that. The variables are actually a characteristic of a case. So if I look at patients, I might look at their weight, their age, their gender, their race, things like that. If I look at schools, I might look whether it's rural, urban, suburban. A label is a special variable used in some data sets, but not all, to distinguish between cases. A common example is customer number. So different cases, like I'm looking at two different patients, can have different values for variable, different ages, for instance. Categorical value places each case into one of several groups or categories, male, female, that type of thing. Quantitative takes on numerical values with arithmetic operations. Makes sense. Such as age, an average age. You can do a calculation to get that. The distribution of a variable tells us the values that a variable takes and how often it takes each value. So if I looked at a classroom, I might look at the distribution to find the youngest and the oldest and how often perhaps the age 20 took place. So we have three main components when we're doing a statistical analysis. We're going to design some study to gather data, and we're looking for data appropriate for the question that we're trying to answer. We're going to summarize what we get from that data, quite often when it's a description of some time. We're going to make an inference to make a decision or prediction. So I might gather data about customers and make an inference about what they will typically buy. Say in terms of what the average spending is. So from sample, I'll find the average spending and I'll predict that's what it would be for the entire population. So we're going to try to say answers and questions that will say things like, who does the data describe? The who doesn't necessarily have to be a person. How many cases are we looking at? What? How many variables does the data set have? What are we looking at exactly for these cases? How do we define these variables? What are the units of measurement? Why? What purpose does the data have? Does it actually answer the questions we're trying to do? Do an analysis for it to find the answer. So when you design the study, we have to figure out how to conduct the experiment, how to select people in order to get results that actually are trustworthy. Examples: planning. The methods for data collection to study the effects of vitamin C. For a marketing study, how do you select people for your survey so you get data that gives you accurate predictions about future sales? How to summarize the raw data and present it in a useful format. So that means how we're going to do this to show the results in a clear manner. Quite often a pie chart or bar graph is what we use. Things such as a stem and leaf or a dot plot are not really used in statistics. except as an idea of how to show data. It's limited to small data sets. Inference. So we're going to make some decision or prediction based on the data. So we make some prediction regarding future sales, perhaps with a marketing survey. We might make some decision such as using a new medication in favor of an old medication because it is more effective. And here are just some other examples for you to look at. Probability. So probability is not the same as statistics, but we use it in there. And we'll get into that in more detail as we go along, and I think you'll find it fairly easy to do. I hope so. We'll make every effort to make sure that's true for you. So let's make sure we're clear on sample versus population. They both have variables. We're looking at the distribution of the variables. And if we're doing graphing, we're typically looking at something like bar graphs or pie charts. Later we'll look at time plots, which are very useful as well. And when we look at the graphs for the quantitative instead of the categorical, that's where the time plots will come in. That's where the histograms will be. That's where the stem plots will be. And that's where the most of our work will be. My way of thinking, I would actually cross out the stem plots and dot plots because we simply don't use them that much. So when we were trying to answer statistical questions, we're trying to answer this for the entire population, but we typically almost always cannot actually observe the entire population, so we grab a sample from it. And the things that we have in the sample are called the subjects. These are the cases we're looking at. And again, they can be people, objects, etc. So this is simply a graphical representation. The big blue kind of egg-shaped thing is the entire population, and a part of it in yellow is called the sample that the subset of. An example here is an exit poll. So we have over 9 million people who voted. We're looking at a little bit less than 4,000 in our sample on this exit poll. And here, if you look at the blue, on a question on an exam, you might just leave this blank with a line for each one, and you would fill it in, knowing that it might say which was the population, which was the sample. So descriptive statistics, we look at maybe charts. We look at things such as the average, Q1, the interquartile range. When we get to inferential statistics, we're going to have some summary too. And that summary is going to take use of a descriptor which is called the standard deviation. And we'll use that to be more precise. So here's a pictorial representation using descriptive statistics. As soon as you see a bar chart, you should recognize this as categorical data. Here we're looking at an inferential statistics example about handguns. We talk about the confidence. So 95% confident means we're not totally confident. Again, we're looking at parameter versus statistics. So again, we're looking at numerical summaries, but one is for the population, that's the parameter, and one is for a sample, that's the statistic. We want to make sure when we're doing this, we're going to use random sampling. And if you can't do random, you really can't do statistic. So when we look at a person-to-person, measurements may vary. If we look at something like schools, you can have variations there in the measurements that you make. And the bigger the sample, the better for us. They'll actually be more accurate for answering our questions. Margin of error. Well, there's going to be some variability from one sample to the next. So if I take a sample and I make a prediction, and I take a different sample, I might actually make a different prediction. This is the type of margin error that we find acceptable, usually about 3% roughly, but it can vary. We're going to pause that for now.